our story differently. A new perspective. A different look. Greater Phoenix A to Z.
Welcome to the Greater Phoenix A to Z podcast. I'm Tatum Baxter, a digital marketing intern at GPEC and your host for today's episode. On this minisode series, Arizona Through Their Eyes, team members through GPEC will take you behind the scenes with their stories about life and work in Arizona. So let's dive in. Picture this, a young intern, Thomas Maynard, stepping into the office for the very first time, unaware that this day would be the start of a journey toward becoming GPEC's Senior Vice President of Business Development. Today on the A to Z podcast, we'll uncover the pivotal experiences, defining skills, and key lessons that shaped his path, offering invaluable insights for those just beginning their own careers. Thank you for joining us today, Thomas.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
We're happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start off. Can you take us back to those early days and paint a picture for the audience about where you were in your life and how you envisioned your career?
Yeah, so I graduated from ASU in the spring of 2013. I was in that summer, bounced around on a couple different internships, and then I started at GPEC in August of that year. So I was very much in the post-graduation phase of my life and trying to figure out, what is next for me. My internship, like I said, started in August, and by November of that year, it was a lot of, right time, right place. From a timing perspective, there was an open position opened up at GPEC, and I put my name in, for that. And long story short, never looked back. And it's been 11 years now on the team. So
that is awesome. Okay, so I know for me, speaking as an intern, my first day, I think for any internship would be intimidating. What was your first day like as an intern for GPEC? Yeah,
looking back at it, you're right. Even just the little things of finding out where the office is and it's on the 25th floor and if you're at the right place and did you park in the right garage, all of that is, you're super stressed before you even walk into the door.
Yeah.
So I had all of that. Then I felt really good when I found the floor, found out where I was supposed to be. Luckily I went to school down here at the downtown Phoenix campus, for ASU. So I was somewhat familiar with downtown. But that was really the first step of trying to logistically figure out where I'm going. Mm-hmm. I've had a couple of internships, growing up. So when I was in college and just after college. So I had experience in that kind of in a more formal professional corporate setting. Every place is different and GPEC was like that as well.
Yeah.
So I remember kind of coming in, definitely having that, fish out of water type feeling, not sure if I fit in, but to be honest, the staff, the other interns were super welcoming, hey, we're here to help you go through this process. And had a little bit of baby steps, early, easy assignments to kind of get the ball rolling, and then just fell in love with the organization and everything that we're doing.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned the parking and all of that, because for my interview as an intern, I gave myself 20 minutes to figure out parking. But of course, the day of my internship, streets were closed. Yep. All of this was happening, and I made it right on time. I almost missed it because of parking. So that's definitely an obstacle you don't think about on your first day of any job. Is okay, parking.
Yeah. And like what you did, you give yourself some extra time, try to plan ahead. And obviously if stuff happens and if you show up late, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's step one, finding the place.
Yeah, finding the parking. I love that. I even do that for restaurants sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, plan ahead.
I'm how's the parking? Is it in downtown? Do I have to parallel park? I don't want to do that. Okay, so I don't know if you mentioned this already, but you studied journalism, right?
Correct.
At ASU?
Yeah.
How was that transition from journalism to economic development in your internship at GPEC?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, my degree was in journalism with a focus in public relations.
Okay.
If you ask me as a senior in college, what do you want to do with your life? Economic development wasn't even on the radar. My answer would have been, hey, I want to work in sports. I actually had an internship with the Diamondbacks at the time, which was awesome, and I loved it. And it was honestly one of the best experiences of my life. But then I got an internship within the marketing department of GPEC. And GPEC has done a really good job of, because we're right here downtown, trying to plug into the downtown Phoenix campus at ASU. So that's what really was the first spark of, hey, they're interested. I used to intern for the city of Phoenix in their PIO, Public Information Office as well. So I kind of had an understanding of GPEC and what their role was. And then I had a classmate that was really the one that says, hey, you should really consider this marketing internship. The best news is it was paid. That was still back in the day where a lot of these internships were for experience only.
Yeah.
So again, I was like, yes, I want the experience and try to learn something new, but also, I want and need a paycheck. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of two birds with one stone. And then it was a slow transition, I think, from, PR journalism side of what I learned in school to economic development. Now, the transferable skills, it's writing, it's communicating, it's trying to get your message across. That's something that I do on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have known how to articulate that in college of how I can transfer those into this career. It was when you're in college, okay, you're in PR, so you're going to go work for an agency or go work in-house for a corporation. Those were basically your two paths. So I'm glad, and I would be lying if I said it was this intentional path that I was going to try to find this new industry that I can try to weave in my journalism and PR skills into. But it definitely worked out. And again, those are skills that I use on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer that you learn more on the job than you do in your classes.
Yeah.
Like for my internship,
Sure.
I've learned so much.
Yeah.
Like that I just would not have learned from any of my lectures. I love my classes and all of that, but you just get this in-person, on-hands experience that's just unbeatable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so I encourage anybody who's thinking about internships. It's so valuable. You need that baseline knowledge, obviously, that you're getting at the university or community college level or even high school level. But to pair that with the real world experience, I couldn't agree more. That's really where you get the most experience.
Yeah. And remind me, what was your exact internship here? Was it my internship, the marketing?
It was a marketing and communications internship. I will say, right now, you guys are doing a lot more work than what we did. We would manage our social channels. We would.
Which was not probably huge.
No, I think we had a Twitter
important.
account. I don't think we definitely didn't have an Instagram account. We had Facebook that I think we'd post pictures and, staff's parents would like it. And that was about it.
Yeah.
Website updates, little things like that,
Sure.
would help out with, some press releases or again, some kind of, news updates on our website. So, but what it led me to is really getting a deep understanding of GPEC and who we are and what we do. And to be honest, even when we hire new people here at GPEC, there's a learning curve to figure out, okay, who do we represent? Who's our customer? How do we communicate our message? So I had the grace period of, during my internship to figure all of that out. Even our new hires for full-time roles, we say, hey, this is going to take you a while just to kind of figure out who's on first and who's doing what. So it was very advantageous to me when I didn't transition from intern to full-time that I had some of that kind of baseline knowledge already figured out.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about your intern experience. So reflecting on that, what experiences shaped your career and your perspective on economic development? And was there a specific project or interaction that stands out as very influential during those times?
Yeah, I think what I learned the most in a general sense was just the concept of managing up. So I was very used to, again, from the college, university level, or even some of my other internships that were with these larger corporations like the city of Phoenix. It was very much like, here is your task list, do A, B, and C, and that's what we are asking you to do as an intern. GPEC is a little bit more open and creative to where, yes, you do have tasks that you need to accomplish, but I'll give you a perfect example. My first real assignment was we had a locate that went down to city of Casa Grande, Franklin Foods. I still remember the company. And we wanted to do some type of article on our website. And the really whole point behind all of that was we wanted to drum up more interest in, at that time, was somewhat of a newer city from an economic development perspective. Casa Grande now is seeing a ton of wins, but back then it was just getting started in terms of large business attraction city. So again, my task was to try to, all right, I know nothing about this project. I know nothing about GPEC's role in it. So I had to go to our, VPs at the time, Angela Talbot, who ran that project from, a business development standpoint, kind of similar to the role that I am in now. And again, you're the new green intern, don't know anything. And at that time we had private offices. So I had to go into her private office, knock on her door. Hey, coming in a little bit more vulnerable. I don't know what I don't know, but tell me, all you can about this project. So without knowing what's that skill set that you really learned is that interpersonal skill of going to someone who's older than you, more experienced than you, more accomplished in the career, obviously, and having that vulnerable position. Angela was great, still is a close friend to me, and get to work with her in the business, which is great. But it's an example of, you can't learn that on a piece of paper. You can't take a test. The interpersonal skills is a huge lesson learned. And that's a muscle that you have to flex. You can only work on that by having real world experience. So yeah, that was a huge piece. Yeah.
And then speaking of that, more along the lines of mentorship, was there a piece of advice that any mentor during your internship gave you that you felt really helped you? Yeah,
there's a lot. And I guess I'm very fortunate at that time in GPEC. There have been people that have moved on to other roles within economic development, other leadership roles. I'm thinking of Stefan Frigia. When I started, he was on our research team, and now he's the CEO of the GPEC equivalent of Northeast Indiana and Fort Wayne. So, but we look back at it now, it's kind of had this all-star list of all of these, great economic developers that were here. I didn't know that at the time, obviously. But, a couple key pieces of advice that I received, and less of like the, wise words of wisdom, but more like the actions that I was able to pick up on from my mentors. One, show up every day with a good attitude and, show up on time and ready to help and work. I learned that from a lot of different groups, or different mentors, back in the day. Probably the best piece of advice that I got is when I transitioned from intern to full-time work. The first job was essentially to run our ambassador program, which is running this events, program that GPEC has had in place for a long time. We had somebody in that role at GPEC. It didn't really work out, so that they transitioned out of that role, and there was a gap that GPEC needed. I had I was like, I'm not qualified for this job. I don't know how to do this. I talked to my boss at the time, Shelley Parnell, who was our VP of marketing. And I was just kind of brainstorming, like, yeah, there's this role that's open. I don't know if I'm qualified. And the best piece of advice is, Thomas, you're an idiot. Just put in an application for it. You never know if you never ask, basically. For sure. So I did. And again, didn't think that I had that knowledge or skill set. Turns out GPEC was looking for someone that was, open, to exploring new things, passionate about the role. One, cared about what we were trying to do. And you can learn all these other things on the job. So had to interview for it. Interviewed with our CEO at the time, Barry Broom, and then interviewed with our team, and then got the role. And that was my first gig at GPEC, probably for the first 18 months, was running these events. And it all worked out. Yeah, I love that. You made a great point. You definitely have to care about what you're doing and what field you're working in as well. I feel like that's a huge factor. Even as an intern, you might be doing small tasks, but when you care about what we're doing as well, you make a even bigger impact, I believe, for sure. I agree. And that if I can, a commercial for the economic development profession in general, that is what we do. We're here to make our community a better place. Yeah. I remember in college, find your passion and what do you want to do in life? And I would always have a tough time answering that question. Like, yeah, I like sports. So, but am I passionate about sports? If that's a career that you want to go to, and there's definitely, people that do that. But what I couldn't articulate was, I'm passionate about, my community. I want to make Greater Phoenix and Arizona a better place. I grew up here, have a vested interest in this. So that's the best part from an economic development perspective. One, every community has an economic development department. So you can go back home or you can go to a new market and really have some impact. Yeah. And within GPEC, there's all these different departments. So if you're the cool, creative, trying to brainstorm ideas, go into our marketing. If you like spreadsheets and numbers and data and right answers, we have a whole research team that's all they do. I sit on business development now, and we're more the kind of the outgoing, for lack of a better term, sales reps on behalf of the region. So it's a lot of interpersonal skills, building and maintaining relationships. I love that. We have a path forward for you there. So that's also the cool part, is you could have that shared interest of the passion of the why of what you're doing, but your specific skill set, at least within GPEC, there's plenty of room to grow. Yeah. Speaking of skills, feel free to brag a little bit here. But as an intern, did you have any certain skills that made you successful? I kind of laugh because right now I'm definitely not a social media expert by any means, but my skill set then is I knew how to write a tweet and draft up a tweet. I love it. So the generation that was, my superiors had no idea how any of that worked. So the fact that I had a pulse and had a personal Twitter account, they said, "Oh, great, Thomas, you're now our social media rep."
Yeah.
Again, if I would do that now, I think I would be laughed out of the room from our internal marketing team because I have no social media presence or very poor social media presence. But so part of that is maybe in a general term, the technology, which again, I think the younger generation and interns, broadly speaking, have a better pulse on that.
Sure.
I think the skill set that really served me well, transitioning from that intern to that full-time role was to like understanding how things work or like how does your specific task impact other departments. I've always had that, perspective of, it's bigger. We're all one big team.
I love that.
So if I'm doing this one little thing, how does this impact maybe the research team or BD? So I had that perspective, I think, very, early age.
I feel like that's a very PR perspective as well. Look at the whole picture.
And maybe you're right. And maybe that's kind of laid the groundwork for all of that it's like you are, in PR, you're kind of working with every team, every part of the department. And I just kind of was raised and kind of came up on this teamwork, we're all in this together perspective. So I've always kind of kept that with me. And then we talked about a little bit earlier, the other big skill set, again, it's the interpersonal skills, which I think is tough to do. It's hard to do when you're younger. Now this whole younger generation that went through COVID, we're all just used to being virtual or sending things, via text or Slack or, that just face-to-face conversation. We're losing that, more broadly on an entire society, but definitely this younger generation that, for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, had to completely shut down. So I sympathize with that, but that's my only piece of advice is you get so much more interaction, in my opinion, with those face-to-face conversations. So that, again, but that's a skill set. It's hard to do. It's intimidating, especially if you don't like talking to people. But it served me well, and I think it's a good skill that everyone should have. Yeah,
you're segueing right into like my next question.
Perfect. Yeah,
it's been perfect.
Yeah.
So whenever I ask for advice, I always hear about networking. It's always networking. How did you network and build those relationships as an intern?
Yeah, and it is super intimidating when you walk into a room and everybody else knows each other and you're the new kid on the block and no one knows who you are. And especially if you're an intern, you feel like you can't give anything or offer anything up, which is not true. But that's easily the perception, that someone would have. And I definitely had those feelings too. I think the hardest part, and I guess maybe the biggest piece of advice is you don't have to boil the ocean, right? If there's a group of 50 people in there, it's not like you have to go in and get 50 business cards and have an individual relationship with all 50 people in the first day. Maybe look at it as like, I'm going to go meet one or two new contacts and learn what they do, learn how they, why are they part of GPEC? How long have they been part of GPEC? So if you get, again, one or two for your first event, now your second event, those two people, go meet one or two more. And then now you can do this over, 3 months or so. Now you have this steady, group of people that really, really well. Who knows? Maybe you meet them at a networking event and they say, hey, let's go grab coffee or lunch. And then you can kind of deepen those relationships. So it is a long-term play. You can't just, wave your magic wand and then go build up all your LinkedIn, connections. But having that approach of like, all right, just get to meet one or two people per event, one that lowers the barrier to where like, okay, did I meet my internal goal? Was I successful? Hey, I met two people. One of them had no interest of who I am or what I wanted to do. That's totally fine. And the other one, I learned more about, what they do. And when you're in those conversations, that's the other piece of advice. Ask them questions. Everyone loves talking about themselves. So, hey, what do you do? How long have you been there? Why are you guys part of GPEC? How can we help you guys more? Little things like that. It's a great conversation starter. And then, again, gets to build those relationships.
Yeah, that is great advice, especially just finding two people. You don't have to talk to everyone, because I've been to a couple events so far as an intern here, and that's been my big issue is like I go into a crowded room and I'm like, okay, I need to talk to as many people as I can. But that's great advice, just to focus on maybe 2 or 3 and have a goal of that. So I love it. So now, as someone who evaluates interns and new hires, what qualities or skills do you look for in a standard candidate? Yeah,
it's a great question. And it's something that even I'm trying to figure out. Is there a specific question I can ask in the interview process to, see if I can identify the right candidate down the road? I really don't think that there is. I don't know if there's like one silver bullet of you ask these 3 or 4 questions and you're going to find your ideal candidate. To me, it's more about attitude and willingness to learn. And I guess what you can't teach, but you can see that passion for the community. It's something you want to make the place that you live a better place. We like hiring from economic development backgrounds, but we don't have an exclusive rule that you have to have worked in economic development before, especially as an intern, right? Most of these interns are, they maybe had other internships, but no direct economic development experience. So there's obviously that baseline skill set. As a specific example, we hired for BD intern a couple years ago, and their main job is going to be reaching out to all of these companies. So first question was are you comfortable getting on the phone and sending emails to strangers? And if
Which
the answer
is hard these days
very
for
hard.
some. Yeah.
And if the answer would have been no, and hey, maybe this isn't the right position for you. So if you can answer that yes, that kind of checks the box. And then more importantly, it's hard to get work ethic and passion for the role and for the community in an interview. But you kind of pick that up, I think, in the process of what's really driving them, what do they want to be here? Easy things of do you know what GPEC is? And it's okay if you don't know everything about GPEC. It's pretty complicated, so we're not going to hold that against you. But did you look at the website? Did you kind of figure out what we're trying to do? What's our mission? Having questions to ask is another key indicator. Oh yeah, they actually care. If they're asking, what's a day in the life of this position, or what does success look like? That's a great question to ask in an interview. Shows that they care, and it's something that they they actually did some research on the front end.
Yeah. Everything keeps going back to caring.
Yeah.
You have to care about what you're doing. You have to care about this and that. I love that. That was a great answer. Thank you. So as you look back at your intern days, how do you continue to grow and learn in your current role as a leader?
Yeah, I think now that I've been here for 11 years, I know a lot about GPEC and how it works and why we do things, but I always want to keep it front of mind that at one point I knew nothing. So coming in with the attitude that, just because we've done it a certain way doesn't mean this is the way that we should be doing it in the future. So I try to have an open mind about, especially when we bring new talent on, whether in an internship or a full-time role of, hey, here's what we do, but from your perspective, if there's a way to do this better, I think we're open, to that and want to be open-minded and don't want to discourage any ideas. Now, there is a method to the madness. There are things where maybe you feel like we're getting shut down. Hey, we're not going to do this. But usually if we say that, it's because we've done this in some other fashion in the past. I'm always this continual learner that, you've never perfected the craft. You're always trying to be, a better manager, a better economic developer. So I hope I always keep that attitude because I think it's a key driver going forward. Yeah.
There's always room to grow.
100%. 100%.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
I have one more question for you before we end off. So it's all about impact. What's your biggest piece of advice for those who want to make the most of their time as an intern and build a meaningful career?
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece of advice is whatever you're hired to do, whatever your job is, do that really, really well. And that's step one. But the biggest success that I've seen from interns and from others is they do their job and then they're asking, once they figure that out, then how can I help others? Or how does my work impact maybe another department or people that you don't really work on? Or just how can I help? And that could be in the form of we're moving tables and chairs and you're there to be part of the team. Because what that shows is you're perfecting your craft and your skill set, but again, looking at that bigger picture of how all of this is interacted. That's going to set you up for a couple of things. One, if there's a position at GPEC, hey, this is someone that we kept talking about a lot of, something that cares about the organization. Again, I was hired, my first role was not in the department that I started at. I was marketing. Then I went technically over to our engagement team and now on business development. So I've had 3 different departments. And I think how that has transferred over is that larger mindset. We also have a pretty good success story of, hey, if we don't have a role with you at GPEC, we have a great reputation within the market. So if we get a nice letter of recommendation from you supervisor, I think that's going to go really, really far. And then I'll end on, we're also very successful to have what we call season 2. So people start at GPEC, maybe they go somewhere else for whatever reason, and they boomerang back into GPEC. So again, I always look at that as a long-term relationship that, hey, maybe we have a role for you today, and if not, let's keep in touch, and we'll love to put in a letter of recommendation, then who knows, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line, maybe you're going to come back, and that's just only going to benefit us here at GPEC.
Well, thank you. I know I've learned a lot from just this interview alone, and I'm guessing our listeners, for any intern or anyone starting at a new job, will be learning a lot from this. And thank you for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast listening app and rate us 5 stars, or you can leave a review for the show, which we would greatly appreciate. To keep up with what's happening in Greater Phoenix, follow us at Greater PHX on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, or at GPEC on X. Until next time, be safe and well.